Hey everybody, it's your old pal the Moo Cow, aka Paul A. Presenza, and it is with a mountain of stuffed animals here between us, and I'm here with,
Hi, I'm Lenore.
yay! And this is yet another episode of Criterion Watch for Indie Film Cafe. And we've got our cardamom teas with us today to help us sort of recuperate from the movie we just saw, which is Godfrey Reggio's amazing 1983 film Koyaanisqatsi.
It's hot.
It is hot. And for those of you who do not know, this film is basically it's like a visual poem, so to speak. There are no actors, there are no characters, there's no dialogue, there's no plot, so to speak. It's mostly just spellbinding visuals that are a lot of time-lapse photography set to this music, this incredible music by Philip Glass that's interwoven with an overall theme. And in fact, they talk about it at the very end where Koyaanisqatsi is a Hopi Indian word which means life out of balance or crazy life or a state of life which is such that it has to be changed. And that's pretty much kind of the overall theme of the film itself. The movie sort of opens in a very, very natural vista. So out in the Southwest where the Hopi Native Americans originated from. So it's a lot of red rock canyons and some deserts, and you see a lot of imagery about natural things. So you're seeing the ground, you're seeing the boulders, you're seeing the sky and all of the clouds in the sky. You're seeing just all sorts of natural things, and then the movie starts to progress towards modern life, and you're starting to see humans coming into the landscape and changing it. You're seeing, the very first thing you see is, the guy in this giant, huge truck, and he comes rolling up and he stops, and then this huge, massive plume of black pollution and coal dust just swarms over and swallows him up. And that's kind of giving you an idea of what's to come, because you see a lot of scarring of the landscape and polluting of the environment. And that's part of what the movie is addressing. But then as it progresses, you start to go more and more towards what it is about the modern world and modern society that is, needs to be changed or is in a state of flux. And you start to see, so you see things like in LA, you go there and you see a bunch of things. In New York, you see a bunch of stuff. And it's just amazing what happens to the visuals. There's a lot of film that's sort of sped up, and it's very, very sort of abstract, and it just kind of shows life, sort of human life, modern human life, as sort of absurd, and almost insect life.
Yeah, almost like worker ants.
Yeah, it's kind of like our society is built around this sort of hive mind or hive idea. You've got, and just the film kind of shows everybody sort of doing their thing, obeying the rules. And when it's done from that distance and from that perspective, it all kind of looks absurd. I mean, it's kind of like, I would think, what an alien might think if they came to Earth and knew nothing about it and just sat there and observed people and humanity for a time and sort of tried to figure out what it is that makes us tick and what it is that we're doing and why are we doing it. And it's pretty amazing. So you've got the sort of natural imagery, which are gorgeous and amazing, and then it transitions into the same kind of imagery, only with buildings and stuff that humans have built, and then it goes into the third part, which is more about humans, their society, how they react in their society, and how ridiculous it kind of all is. So what did you think of the film?
Well, I mean, I'd say the movie itself was pretty celebratory regarding, like, nature.
Yeah.
But its tone regarding humans seemed a bit split. Like, it seemed to both kind of not like cities, but it also clearly didn't like the city's demolitions.
Sure. And it's
And
interesting because the when and that was when that was shot was in the late 70s, early 80s, and New York City had just an appalling dead section.
like
There was
that one movie you showed me when I
right
was
Wolfen.
here. Yeah.
Right, and I'm actually quite fascinated with that period of time. So in the 60s and 70s, there were just large chunks of New York City that were pretty much abandoned, and very few people lived there. And those that did, I mean, it was mostly people squatting or drug addicts or criminals or whatever, homeless people. And there was just blocks and blocks and blocks and blocks of it. It was a desolate wasteland. And then in the early 80s, that all started to change. They started to do all this sort of urban renewal, and they started destroying all of that. So most of that is gone now. And in fact, New York City has gone through a huge, huge transformation. I know when I first saw New York City way back in, I guess it would have been 1981, 82, it's very different city now than it is when if I go to see it now today, and a lot of that is for the better. Uh, some character is gone too. It's a lot more corporate, a lot more family friendly, and a lot of the interesting stains and sort of darkness of the city is gone. But it's really preserved in this film, and not only do you get to see like blocks and blocks and blocks of it, but you also get to see, like you said, the demolition and the effects of it, and then people living in there. There are actually people living in these things in just awful conditions. And did you notice they're showing the buildings, and they're showing like all the detritus of all the other buildings. It's just like piles and piles of trash and brick and stuff. As high as the first story is the first story of a building, so at least 10 feet high, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, it does not flinch away from that at all. But in other shots, it seems like they're saying the city is its own kind of beauty, because in some shots, it almost looks like you can see through the buildings because they're so reflective.
Right, right. And as a matter of fact, especially when you're seeing when the visuals are showing you the streets and the buildings and the cars and the lights, and everything is sort of moving in this time lapse photography, it almost looks like, to me, like the streets were veins and the lights and the cars were like blood vessels.
And
like the city's alive, and here are the blood vessels moving around in their little predetermined loops, bringing oxygen to the body, which is the city.
And in some shots, it's like dawn or sundown, and all of the lights in these buildings are a very vibrant, plant-like, spring-like green, and it's really startling.
It's amazing.
It also shows things like doctors helping people, treating patients, and they have this one shot of a doctor reaching out and holding someone's hand while they're on their bed.
And that's emotionally, that kind of thing happens in the third part of the film, when it starts to slow down and you start to focus on some of the individuals, and you're only going to see them for like 15, 20 seconds, but in this kind of a film, that's an eternity, because so much of it is very, very, very quick. Again, a reflection of modern society, but when it does, there's a lot of emotional impact. The very first thing, the one that always gets me, is the very first one, when the Hopi Indian chants are just start, and you see the old man in the street, and he turns towards the camera, and his eyes, they're just without even the tiniest bit of hope, and it's devastating. And you see several other people like that, and then like the old person with her hand, and it's shaking, and there's blood, and you're just like, oh my God, somebody help this! It's probably some poor little old lady, and it's emotionally amazing.
With the shaking hand was someone the doctor held.
Right, or a nurse or someone. You couldn't exactly tell, but it was just fascinating. So yeah, there's a range of emotions that go through this. It's not just, oh, isn't life absurd? You see and experience a whole range of emotions throughout this film. I think you were saying that you yourself weren't even sure how many emotions you were feeling at various points. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, like this one scene where that one guy had the green razor and he was just shaving on camera. I'm not sure how he did that without a mirror, but I was really struck by that, partly because green is my favorite color, and also because the guy looked uncannily like my grandfather.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he could have been my grandfather's twin.
So this is another street scene that Godfrey Reggio has set up, and he's seeing you're sort of focusing on one little point in this large, massive street crowd, and it's this older gentleman who has just decided to groom himself in the street in the middle of the day, because why not? You're an old person, you don't care. So he's got his little plastic razor, and he's just kind of like going over little bits here and there.
Which is funny because he's already clean shaven.
I mean, it's funny. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful moment. It shows you sort of, you know, an instance of individuality among a human being,
Yeah.
and it's cute in its own way, and it's I liked it. It's one of many little episodes like that that you get hung up on, and yeah, it's I have to give the two people that you have to talk about in this is Godfrey Reggio, who's the director and who set up all of this, and it's just his visuals and his whole setup. His whole thing is just amazing. It's just an amazing piece of film. And then let's talk about Philip Glass and his astounding music that's set there. Talk about the music.
The music was like its own character in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was just perfectly timed to everything, and it was very swelling in some regions and kind of depressing in others.
Yeah, Philip Glass is a sort of postmodernist, minimalist composer. He tends to focus on a few different instruments and allow them to sort of carry the weight of his pieces, and sometimes they can feel a little, I don't want to say Spartan or cold, but they're very modernistic or postmodernistic, and it really fits in with the way that the film was showing and the feelings of it. Plus, it was weaving in all of these vocals that are in apparently the Hopi Indian tongue, which is pretty cool. So you're getting the music, you're getting the vocals, and you're getting the chants, and you're hearing all of this at the same time that all the visuals are coming through. And sometimes it's very, very quick and while the people are sort of dashing back and forth, and you know the Godfrey Reggio is showing humans at their most absurd when they're just all running, and it's because it's all time lapse, so it looks really strange and super quick. And you know, everybody looks. I guess they all think they have something important to do, but you know, in the abstract, it looks ridiculous.
Yeah, though it is just slow enough that you can focus on and track individuals.
Well, it does become harder. I mean, you notice when the music sort of starts to crescendo and it gets faster and faster, the visuals start to get faster and faster. And I'm telling you, seeing it like this was one thing. Seeing it on the big screen like that can be overwhelming. It's an overwhelming experience the first time you ever see this. It's amazing.
Other things too is like the factory scenes.
Right, those were cool.
The food ones were just kind of shocking because people were handling food that was about to be packaged and weren't wearing gloves.
Yeah, they had this Oscar Mayer Wiener machine, and it had like maybe, I don't know, 20 tracks where all these wieners are coming down, but they're all coming down at just incredible breakneck speeds, like all these different sides, and you're just sitting there staring at this like, oh my God. But it's, you know, it's a comment on the sort of mechanized, you know, idea of our society, and everything is sort of set up to be just like that. You know, our lives and our work and everything is set up like that, and you know, it's difficult to remove yourself, and that's kind of what the movie's doing. It's removing the viewer just for a little bit out of this crazy rat race machinery that we call society, and when you do that just for a little bit, you can sort of focus and see how really ridiculous and absurd modern life is. And you know, we're dashing around on this world doing things that we think are important when really they're not. You know, they might seem so immediately in the immediate idea, but you know, as far as prosperity or posterity is concerned, whatever we're doing doesn't really matter, and it's kind of silly. And there's a level of hubris involved that we think that our lives are so important, and the real problem with that is that the legacy we're leaving behind while we're chasing all of these ridiculous things that we're doing is a polluted and scarred environment that you know, will be very, very different for future generations and not nearly as good for us now or for that people enjoyed in the past, and we're responsible for that. So what did you think about that part?
Oh, I have mixed feelings on it. I mean, humans behave pretty uniformly, especially in cities. But it was sort of funny to see them act a lot like insects.
Right.
I kind of mentally tagged those parts as a bug's life. But for all uniformity, all those people's lives were still pretty important.
Sure, to them, sure, and even to each other. And you know, I like the way that it sort of steps back and sort of presents things, and it's funny because there's a number of times where, you know, normally in most films, the directors always tell the actors, "Don't look at the camera, don't look at the camera." Well, everybody was looking at the camera
Because it was unusual.
because it was unusual, and because, yeah, and you get that weird sensation of the observed now observing the observer, you know, and it's really interesting, and you do get that sort of feeling like, okay, some kind of creature from outer space is now sat down and is watching us, and they're judging us, and
it's also
know?
that all of those people, none of them were actors. There were no
Right.
characters in it. Those were actual people.
right.
And I'm really curious to learn what happened to some of them.
And for the most part, they're just people going about their normal lives. Now, there are a couple of set shots where he, you know, like the Vegas shot, which was hysterical, by the way.
Ladies who were all in orange.
The ladies in
Against an
orange
orange
with their
background.
horrible dye jobs and the overly crazy blinky lights of Vegas. That was a cute shot, and there were a few other really cute shots. There's one that I always like where they're all going into this external elevator, and it's a huge elevator, and it's like 100 people pile into this elevator, and they're all squashing themselves in, and they all get in except one little guy at the end, and the doors close, and he turns around, and it's like, it's just funny, you know. At the same time, there's 100 people going up in this massive thing, and you know, it's just funny. You never stop to think about how things are. There is some stuff that is just, you know, the emotional impact of it is just amazing, and it gets me every time. You know, there are echoes. I was telling you, there are echoes of 9/11 in this. There's definitely echoes of the Challenger disaster in this. There's some heady stuff going on. The final 10 minutes of it is when you've kind of, because the movie opens up with a rocket. You couldn't even tell it was a rocket at first. It's so abstract. Because you're seeing it from like this one corner, and then it lifts up, and you're seeing just this incredible amount of fire coming out of the engines, and you end up going back to that towards the end, and then you're following the rocket up, and it goes up, and it goes up, and it goes up, and it goes up, and all of a sudden the whole thing explodes, and you end up focusing on what's left of this one rocket as it plummets back to Earth slowly.
It was the crew module. There were people inside.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, that was probably an unmanned rocket that went up, but you cannot help but think about Challenger, and just the emotional impact of that just was just devastating. So I'm sitting there with tears coming down my face. I don't know if it got you like that, but it got me.
My heartbeat just shot up. The only thing I could hear was my blood in my ears.
Oh yeah. So there are moments like that throughout the film, and you really, really need to experience it for yourself. If you can get the Blu-ray, so the Blu-ray is part of Criterion's the Qatsi trilogy, and there are 3 films that Godfrey Reggio ended up doing, 2 of which I've seen. So there's Koyaanisqatsi. The second one is called Koyaanisqatsi, which I have seen. Almost as good as Koyaanisqatsi, not quite. But again, there's some really, really good music in there, and it's part of the package, so definitely check it out. And then finally, there is Koyaanisqatsi. I'm not sure about the pronunciation of that. I've actually never seen this, so I definitely would like to check this out. So here's the box again, and this is again part of the Criterion Collection. And it has all kinds of great stuff in there, all kinds of extras, and I highly recommend, if you like this film, if you like this kind of a film, you definitely need to find this. I've been waiting for this to come out in Blu-ray forever. It's the sort of film that you might not want to watch every week or every month even, maybe once a year, because it's such a a transformative, abstract, metaphoric experience that you can only sort of unpack that maybe once in a great while. I like to see it maybe once every year, every couple of years. I definitely like to show it to people who have never seen it, never heard of it, know nothing about it, and just kind of allow them to sort of experience it for the first time. So what did you think compared to some of the other films that we've seen about Koyaanisqatsi?
My emotions are still pretty mixed. I don't have any one thing to say.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's
was,
an overwhelming experience.
yeah, I'm still kind of shaken by the rocket explosion.
Oh my God, it's devastating.
Oh, this was filmed in 1983.
Okay.
Not early 70s.
Well, it wasn't early. I didn't think it was early. I thought it was late 70s.
Oh.
But they would have done some work. It took a while for them to actually put it all together. It was released in '83. I remember seeing it in the theater and being blown away with it. Not only did I see it then, I saw it several times in the big screen, and way back at my first crack at grad school in Philadelphia, I was lucky enough to catch it live. So what happened was Philip Glass and I think it was the Trans-Siberian Orchestra showed up and played in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania, and then they showed the film, and then they played the live score right there. And it was amazing. And just to go and experience that again was just simply fantastic. So I don't know whether that sort of thing will ever be offered again. If it is, I sincerely recommend that you get there and experience it for yourself. Or if it ever comes out on a big screen, definitely check that out. It'll be worth it. But see it in the Blu-ray. In the meantime, get the Criterion version. It's pretty darn amazeballs. And at some point, if we ever jump up to the next level and do 4K, I'm hoping this, because I'm sure this is a 4K transfer. I'm sure they did that. That's one of the things that Criterion always does. So it'll be great to see it in 4K. I have to say there were some of the opening visuals were not quite as clear as I had hoped. I guess that's due to the film quality, that it was time they can only restore it so much. But it was only a few moments here and there, and it's usually the areas where you're seeing the sky, and some of it was a little on the grainy end or pixelated end. But for the most part, it looked really, really good, especially as it transitioned to the latter half, and you're seeing a lot of stuff in the darkness, like you were saying, the greens and the blues at night, the streets, the moon scene. Remember the moon scene?
The moon looked so big.
Oh, you got to see this gorgeous, gorgeous moonrise in the city, juxtaposed next to a building. So you get to track the moon as it goes behind the building.
I kept thinking, oh no, we're not going to be able to see the whole moon. It's going to be blocked by that building. But we got to see the whole
And
thing.
it's massive, and you can see all kinds of detail in it. There's lots of really great NASA stuff. One of my favorite moments is when you pull back, oh God, I nearly threw up, and you're seeing like from a horizon to horizon bubble, and you're seeing the whole city, and it's like you're like a mile in the air, and it's like going to give you vertigo. And then you pull back, and then now all of a sudden you're seeing the city from like infrared satellite photography, and you're seeing the patterns and the colors that the infrared satellites are seeing. And then you start looking at these fabrics, and you realize these are Hopi or Native American, I think, weavings, and you're seeing how the rugs or the weavings patterns are very similar to the satellite imagery. I mean, how amazing is that?
Yeah, and there was this other one where it was video of the Earth as a rocket was launching into orbit. That was really cool.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. One of the earlier parts is when you're transitioning from seeing the mountains into seeing the clouds, and it's time-lapse photography showing you how clouds behave, and it behaves just like water, and then you're like, well, duh, it is water. So when you're seeing the camera set up there and the time-lapse photography is capturing it, and the clouds are just rolling in like waves. It's just like waves. And then you see waves in an actual ocean, and it's the same thing. The same wave action you're seeing in the ocean going up against the shore is the same thing you're seeing with the clouds rolling up against the mountains. It's just amazing, and it's great because we don't see the world like that because we don't have the time and we don't have the equipment, but Godfrey Reggio does, and so he sets up and he will capture 12 hours of a given day in a particular area, and you get to see everything, and it's sped up, and it just looks amazing. It's just so many great visuals there. I definitely caught that opening shot in The Shining where you're in the helicopter shot and you're seeing the mountains and the road, and there's a shot very similar to that there. As a matter of fact, at one point, the helicopter comes down really, really low, and you feel like you're like an inch off the water, and you're seeing everything going really, really fast. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and at the end, like the very end, when it shows those paintings again, and they look like buildings.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's true. I didn't think about that, but you're right. So lots and lots to see and enjoy. The visuals are just amazing. The music is just amazing. I used to listen to the soundtrack my first go around to grad school, and I would need music to relax, and I would turn off all the lights and I would put this on, and I would just let it move me to places. And this is a film and an experience that will do that, and I just can't recommend people more to see this, especially if you're looking for something different than just not only Hollywood movies today, but of any time. If you're looking for something other than the standard, linear story, this is something for you. This is more of an art experience. It's more like going to a museum and seeing an abstract piece of art and enjoying it for what it is, and experiencing all the emotions and all of the visuals and just everything. And it's a delight, I thought. What did you think?
It's intense.
It's definitely intense.
I still feel a bit shaken by that rocket explosion.
Oh yeah. And anyone who experienced the Challenger when it happened, especially, you're gonna feel it right here. Trust me. But the whole movie isn't like that. There's definitely bits of humor. Others are just jaw dropping. Like, wow, that's just what an amazing shot. So.
Yeah, the camera quality, for the most part, was amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely amazing, flawless, spectacular, and So I'd say that's about it. So do you have any interest in seeing the other films? Koyaanisqatsi and Nadakwatsi?
What do those mean?
I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, I've seen this one once. I liked it. My disappointment only because it wasn't quite as good as Koyaanisqatsi, but I mean, how do you top that? How do you come close to that? This is such an amazing, amazing movie.
Oh, this one slows down.
Yeah, and capturing it is like trying to capture lightning in a bottle. It's just not going to happen. But this is still a really good film. I have not seen this one. I have heard that the third one isn't quite as good as the others. I still want to check it out, though. Still very, very interested in seeing it. So maybe we'll pop those on at some point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? Do you have anything else about this film you want to say? Any other scenes stand out for you?
The scenes of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, those are intense.
It was like, because the curves still followed the river, it was just larger at the top and narrower at the bottom. Like, you could almost see how they were carved as oceans receded and rivers narrowed over time.
Right, that was pretty cool. I also liked Twinkie Cam. The same thing that happened with the hot dogs, where you're seeing all of the Twinkies on the conveyor belt. Well, they put the camera on the conveyor belt with the Twinkies, and you get to go down and experience life as a Twinkie in a factory. That was pretty cool. I enjoyed that.
Life as a Twinkie.
Life is a Twinkie. So like I said, there's really good balance, just like the theme of the film about having life out of balance is a bad thing. This movie has balance. It's got its emotional impact, but it's also got its humor, and yeah, It's just a fabulous film. So I think that about wraps up this episode of Criterion Watch. I really recommend you guys all go out and find it if you can. Those of you who have seen it, I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as me. And we will see you next time, where we will bring you yet another very high quality Criterion Collection film. All right? So with that note, we will say good night. Get the bunnies and the puffs.
There's a lot of stuffed animals.
There's a lot of stuffies. So we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.